Stories that we lived in a little 3-room brick house that had, as I thought about it, it had one wooden room that opened onto a back porch and then a tiny little room with no windows that was almost like a storage room, in addition to 3 brick rooms. Now, one day, Dad was asleep. He was working swing shift at the old Kentucky Ordnance Plant. So he was asleep in the bedroom, and Carol and I were playing on the floor in the living room. Now, our house was heated with one big warm morning stove. Now, the post office, we were about 75 feet off the circle, and the post office was on the other side of the circle. And Mother had put something down on the floor and told us to sit there and play, and she was going to the post office, and if anything happened, to call Daddy. So as we sit there playing, I looked up, and the wallpaper behind the stove was beginning to flame. And I looked at the wallpaper and I said, Carol, look, the house is on fire. And he said, what? And he looked and he said, we're supposed to call Daddy. So we went running into the bedroom, which we weren't allowed to do unless it was something really important. And so we went running into the bedroom hollering, Daddy, Daddy, come quick. The house is on fire. And he said in his sleep, whose house? And we said, our house, Daddy. And he leapt out of the bed, and I think he must have gotten 4 or 5 feet from the bed the first time he landed. And he had on his boxer shorts and his t-shirt, which we slept in. And he went running in there, saw the flames going up. He went to the kitchen where we always kept a bucket of water and a dipper. In those days, everybody drank out of the same dipper. So if anybody was sick, everybody was sick. But he grabbed that bucket of water and that dipper, and he took that dipper and he flipped it with water in it up against that wall until he completely put the fire out. The mantelpiece, which was right by it that went to an old fireplace, actually the varnish that was on it had blistered, and it stayed blistered as long as we lived in that house because he never got around to scraping it off and redoing it. But they did have an extra piece of wallpaper, and they pulled the wallpaper down and fixed a new piece of wallpaper, which was much newer and cleaner and looked rather odd, but it wasn't burned at least.
So you stayed in that house then for how long?
We stayed in that house until June, that I was going to be 5 years old in September, but I was 4 years old. And Daddy had come home and told Mother that he had made the decision to buy the big old Sanford house that Mr. Sanford had inherited from his grandfather, and I think he was the man that wrote the book Sue brought called Orr. And Mrs.
The man's name was Orr.
Yeah, that was Edward's grandfather.
Right, and the book was called Vital Statistics of Far Western Kentucky.
Right.
Yes.
Anyway, Mr. Sanford had married a woman by the name of Mary Lou, and she was a home economics teacher. And she told him that she was not living in that totally outdated, horrible house. She had to have a house, and she was much younger than Edward. She had to have a house with a flushing toilet, or she was not going to marry him. So he had bought another house on the western side of town and had done some rehabbing. And one of the things he'd done was he put in a real bathroom with a flushing toilet. But then he had to sell this house. And so we bought that, and I've told the story of us moving in. The only thing I think I didn't tell you is Mother and Daddy were going back from the little house to the big house and the big house to the little house. And it was mid-afternoon, and I was 4 years old, and I was a little spoiled. Anyway, Mother got in the car and started to drive back to the little house to get something. And I said, Mama, I want to go. And she said, no. And I started screaming, and she drove off, and I ran down the driveway behind her, screaming my little head off. And Mother didn't do anything except park that car, turn off the engine, get out, and come and get me, turn me over, and paddle my butt and say, go in the house, get on the bed that's put up, and take a nap, and don't say another word.
And I hear rain.
I do too.
Well, maybe it won't rain all the way till the hurricane comes, but this is 2016 and we're waiting for Hurricane Matthew actually right now.